Hello pals and welcome to a new video. I hope that you're all doing very well. Today I'm going to be talking about two very recent reads that are both books about espionage. The first one is a historical account of a Second World War double agent, and the second is a spy novel by the master of spy novels, John le Carre himself. I also have a bonus film recommendation for the end of the video as well. Let's go ahead and make a start. Let's head to the history book first. So I read this on my Kobo, so what I'll do is insert a photograph of the book here. The book is Agent Zig Zag by Ben Macintyre. I've spoken quite a lot about my love of Ben Macintyre's history books before, so I won't go too much into that. This was written in 2007 and it follows a British double agent called Eddie Chapman. I'll quickly go into some background, but because this book reads quite a lot like a thriller, has a lot of like twists and turns, I will try not to put in any, not spoilers, but you know what I mean. Some background. This book follows British double agent Eddie Chapman. As it opens, we meet Eddie Chapman and he is a Soho criminal. He's a crook. He is eventually arrested and imprisoned on the island of Jersey. Anyone familiar with kind of Second World War history will know that that island becomes occupied by the Nazis in 1940. He is serving at His Majesty's pleasure when the Nazis take over the island. And through a quite astonishing turn of events, which I won't go into here because I don't want to spoil too much, Eddie Chapman ends up in occupied France being trained as a German intelligence officer by the Abwehr, who, for anyone who's unfamiliar, they are basically the German intelligence service. They train him as an agent and as a saboteur, and they send him, because he's English, onto England to work on their behalf. None of this will be a surprise if you've read the blurb of the book. Eddie Chapman is then parachuted into England, get my tea, then parachuted into England, and he very quickly turns himself over to the police and then the British Intelligence Services, MI5. That's a kind of basic introduction to this history book. Obviously, these are real life events. One of the things that I love about this, and it is mentioned by one of Eddie Chapman's kind of spy handlers in this, that if you were to read this story, the story of him as Agent Zig Zag and as a kind of British intelligence double agent, you would, if you were to read this in a fiction novel, you would dismiss this as completely implausible. This book is full of the most astonishing events, twists, turns, and the sense of adventure. My cats are around, so you will see them. I got a few questions. This is Binks, like Thackeray Binks from Hocus Pocus. One of the reasons why I headed to this book over the last couple of weeks is because the news cycle has gotten so grim from around the world. I really wanted a book that would keep my attention, and anybody familiar with Ben Macintyre's kind of history works will know that that's exactly what this delivers. So what are the things that I love about this? This is very well written. Like I said, it kind of reads like a thriller. It's pacey, it's detailed, it's fun. But the writing is really, really, really well done. The second thing that I loved about this is just how well researched this is. I think in large part this is based on a number of declassified MI5 files from the early noughties, and I think that includes kind of interviews, interrogation reports, radio kind of transmitter records, etc, etc. You get the idea, but that really does kind of shine through in the detail and the kind of complexity of this. Third thing that I loved about this, and I think that this is central to all of Ben Macintyre's kind of spy history works, is the complexity and the psychology of Eddie Chapman himself. So Agent Zig Zag is that he is brave, he is intelligent, he has a really great sense of adventure, he's curious, but he's also a convicted criminal, he's a womanizer, he's a liar, but it is in the context that the outbreak of the war really does bring out the best in him for the duration of the war. I think he has in him all of the successful traits that a spy kind of would have. The grey areas of his character are really well drawn out in this account. You're never quite on a sure footing with him. You're never quite sure of his loyalties or his motivations, and very often he is doing the right thing but on a personal level, betraying his like closest friends. It's just a really interesting account of what is a very kind of complex man. Chapman's story in this can also be placed in a wider context of British intelligence during the Second World War, depending on how familiar you are with that, on the kind of Bletchley Park code breakers, and I think probably more relevant, the 20 Committee. So for anyone out there who's not heard that before, they are a committee within British intelligence during the Second World War, incredibly successful. They run a network of British double agents. Essentially every German agent in Britain during the Second World War is turned by this committee. They're called the 20 Committees because the double cross in Roman numerals is 20, which is just a great little story that I always love. But that kind of wider context is brought in quite a lot in this, and will also tie into our bonus kind of film recommendation a little bit later. I touched on this earlier, but one of the main things that I took from this, and it's a definite grey area, is Eddie Chapman's relationship with his German spy master. They come to have quite an enduring friendship, which kind of outlasts the Second World War. And again, you're never sure if his German spy master is not also kind of aware that Eddie is a double agent. There's a lot of complexity there, an awful lot of nuance, but I found their relationship really quite moving, especially as the Second World War ends, communications between them. I actually found myself like tearing up quite a lot, which is a book filled with the most fascinating accounts of British intelligence, of a lot of kind of moral ambiguity, of dishonesty, but also real like loyalty and courage. If you want something to read that will just kind of get you, I hate to say it, but just get you like turning the pages and really kind of capture your interest, then this is definitely one that I would recommend. We'll come back to Ben Macintyre a little bit later. Let's move on to the second spy espionage recommendation, and that is A Call for the Dead by John le Carre. I included this in my January haul and said I wanted to get to this because this is the first in the George Smiley novels, which is a series of kind of spy novels. They're set during the Cold War. This was written in 1961, but I think it's set in the late 50s. Like I said, this is first in the George Smiley novels. I've read some of the Smiley novels and some of his works out of order. So I've read Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy and The Honourable Schoolboy, which are 2 and 3 in a series within a series, which are the Carre trilogy. And I read those, I was thinking about this when I was thinking about this video. I read those in 2011 when the Gary Oldman version of Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy came out. So quite a while ago now. And I remember as I got to The Honourable Schoolboy, I thought to myself, I've done this all wrong. I've read them completely out of order. And I must at some point go back and kind of redo them. And I really, really enjoyed this. My expectation was that this will be fine and okay, but I will need to get through it to kind of be introduced to the characters, to read them in order, etc. But I ended up really, really enjoying this. It's nice and short. Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and a spy who came in from the cold. I would say, lauded for their kind of slow, considered, really quite like literary pace, and that does start with this. This has the exact same literary slow burn, really well considered. As soon as I started this in the very first chapter, I thought to myself, I'm absolutely gonna love this. I'm gonna race through this, and that's exactly what I did. If you've ever read any other le Carre novels, Tinker Tailor, A Spy Who Came In From the Cold, a lot of the characters are introduced in this, and it is really good for that. This is set in the 1950s and it opens with George Smiley. He's working for the circus. The circus is basically British intelligence services, kind of think of a combination of MI5 and MI6. One of the things that I love about this is that in this, he's kind of just about surviving under the weight of civil service kind of bureaucracy, basically. I don't want to give too much away from this because this does really read like a thriller, but the book opens with a Foreign Office official has committed suicide. The day before he commits suicide, George Smiley holds a kind of routine security interview with him, following an anonymous tip-off that says that this kind of civil servant has previously been a member of the British Communist Party. Like I just mentioned, this book for me is almost a crime novel. I know that there's tons of crossover between crime and spy genres. I would say this is 75% crime and maybe like 25% spy, which is no bad thing at all. I love both of those genres, to be honest, and a crime novel within the context of British intelligence is absolutely perfect for me. Things that I absolutely loved about this, and I mentioned it earlier, is the kind of literary, slow, considered, subtle pace of this novel. This isn't the kind of Ian Fleming glamorous spy hijinks. If that's what you're kind of looking for, you probably won't get along with this. Another thing that I love about the George Smiley novels is George Smiley himself. He is not a glamorous spy. That is made kind of very clear. He is very intelligent though, stoic. He is, again, slow, he's careful, he's methodical. The opening chapter to this is called A Brief History of George Smiley. And if you've read Tinker Tailor, you'll find that really interesting because it's probably the most comprehensive introduction to his character, both like his physical appearance, his emotional life, his intellectual life. He's described in the opening chapter by his own wife as breathtakingly ordinary. Another thing that I loved about this, and I loved it about some of his other novels, is the sense of atmosphere. London in the 50s and 60s, intelligence during the Cold War. One of my main memories that I have from reading this in 2011, and also kind of watching the Gary Oldman film and the Alec Baldwin kind of TV series, is that very 50s, 60s London, a very old school type of like intelligence services. This has that in buckets as well. I also found that a lot of the characters in this, George Smiley, another kind of quite important character in this is a police officer called Mendel who works for CID, the widow of the Foreign Office official who commits suicide, Elsa Fenham. I found that they're all very human, very real. They felt very authentic. One of the ways that really comes through as well is that George Smiley at one point in this is in hospital, he's recovering, and one of the things that he's most concerned with is that he doesn't have any books, and so it is impossible for him to keep up with his reading. Just little things like that I found were really interesting touches. I do think that Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is still a good place to start because I do think it's the more in-depth, complex, polished novel. He's really at the height of his game with that, and you might not want to read all 7, 8 of the kind of George Smiley novels. If you just want to see what he's like, probably start with that. The writing is not quite as polished. It's sometimes hard to discern who is thinking and who is talking, because the viewpoint changes on occasion between Smiley to Mendel, but it's done in such a way that you're so used to it being Smiley, the first time that it happens, it's a little bit jarring. That aside, all in all, I would really recommend this. Would also really recommend Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I'm going to go through and work my way through the series. Next one up is A Murder of Quality, which again is I think quite like murder mystery focused, before we get onto like the true spy novels a little bit later on with The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And now a quick film recommendation. I included this because I was having a chat with my mum as we had lunch yesterday, and she said she just recently watched this film. I had also just recently watched it after I finished Agent Zig Zag, and that is Operation Mincemeat. And it's a very sweet, earnest, really quite strange but true story from the Second World War. In this film, we get some reoccurring characters from Agent Zig Zag from that 20 committee, the head of the 20 committee. Operation Mincemeat was a real-life scheme created by the British Intelligence Service in 1943, I believe, and that was to essentially fool Nazi Germany into thinking that the British planned to invade Greece rather than Sicily. The way that they did this was that they planted false, really quite elaborate plans to invade Greece, planted them on a corpse, which they then floated onto the shores of a Spanish beach in Cadiz. It's a fantastic story, very strange, but this film has Colin Firth in it, Matthew McFadden, Johnny Flynn, which are like two Mr. Darcys and a Mr. Knightley. It's just a really sweet, light, enjoyable film. That's, yeah, just perfect for the moment. I find that because I'm really trying to control my news intake, that actually what I'm looking for is just a little bit more kind of like light-hearted, and then with my reading, just things that I know will really catch my attention. So I definitely recommend all three of these. Pretty much it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you're having a lovely day wherever you are. If you've read any kind of spy or crime novels, or even just anything that is, you know, just really caught your attention, I would love to know what those are, and I will see you all very soon.